Let's have a look at this headline. In the Times, arrest fewer people to save prison space, police chiefs told. An internal document by the National Police Chiefs Council recommends pausing non-priority arrests until there is capacity in overcrowded jails. Now, you'll know, as regular viewers of Politics Live, that we've covered this story about overcrowded prisons and jails, not enough prison spaces. But, Matt, perhaps you can explain, what's a non-priority arrest?
So, for instance, one of the things that the National Police Chiefs Council is talking about here is big operations that might result in large numbers of arrests. But look, that's the detail. The practical point here is that we shouldn't be in this situation. There's a reason why the government is focusing on expanding those number of prison places. That is a real priority, because we shouldn't be seeing arrests driven by numbers of police places, number of prison places. That cannot be the right metric.
No, but people will be concerned watching the programme when it says, you know, pause non-priority arrests. If you are the victim of a crime, all right, maybe not the most serious crime, but if you're a victim of a crime, you might be alarmed to hear that the person who has committed the crime is not going to be arrested.
No, I agree, and it's important to say this is from the Police Chiefs Council, it's not from the government, but there is no way of spinning this as in any sense a good thing. What it underlines is why that building a prison...
Is government failure?
Well, no, what it underlines is why it is important to deliver that programme that is working through the backlog in the courts and building those great number of prison places.
It was the Conservative Party that in August 2019 said it was going to generate 10,000 more places and spend £2.5 billion on new prisons. So what happened to that?
Well, as I say, that can't come soon enough.
So it didn't happen. And this is another symptom, basically, of the managed decline of the country. I mean, for most people out there, what this is sending is a big signal, which is if you shoplift, if you deal drugs, if you physically assault members of the public or police officers, basically, you're not going to go to prison, you're going to be staying in the community, and we're mainstreaming petty crime and the decline of the quality of British society.
No,
That's essentially what's happening.
It's really important to say, look, you've just used an example. There is no situation here where assaulting a police officer is categorised as not a priority. So I think
assaulting a member of the public.
No, I think it's important to be accurate on what the details of what this is talking about, because I don't think it's fair to alarm the public in any sensible way. But it's also right to say we have to crack on with getting through the backlog in the courts, which is a COVID consequence. We have to crack on with that prison building programme.
Right, what would Labour do? This could be your problem if you win the election, whenever it is.
Well, it won't be our problem, because we will absolutely get into addressing the causes of crime. This is something the government has failed to do for 14 years. We don't have youth services across our country, and I'm really pleased that Yvette Cooper has really set out that programme about diverting
Rachel,
people away from crime.
The problem is here and now.
The
These prisons are almost full.
Well, we've got the highest population in prisons that we've had in the whole of the history of this country.
So my question to you is, what would Labour do? You will be faced with the same questions. What would you do on day one to address the fact that the prisons are almost full and police officers are being recommended to stop making arrests?
Well, we certainly won't be taking the foot off the accelerator when it comes to calling people to justice, and that's really important, that we won't be saying, you know, these people have broken the law, but that's OK, because it isn't OK.
So you'll release more people early?
Well, no, we will get a penal system which actually works. So if we look at things like the reoffending rate at the moment, incredibly high, and that is because we aren't putting the resources into the system. But also, we are going to put the police on the streets, which is going to stop the levels of crime that we're seeing in the communities at the moment. 13,000 people across community policing, something our communities are crying out for, taking and de-escalating the levels of antisocial behaviour that we're seeing. Many of these areas which we're talking about, the police shouldn't be arresting for, we will have the people in place to de-escalate, divert and ensure that people are taken on a different pathway.
I mean, Taj, what do you feel about the suggestion of people who have been sentenced to a sentence that's less than 12 months, for example? Should they go to prison or should they do community sentences? Should we increase the number of people who do more in the community than go to prison?
I think we have to look at each crime on its own, but crucially, the real centrepiece of the government's policy over the last more than 10 years has been austerity, and we've seen what's happened to our criminal justice system. It's woefully underfunded. So we can talk about community sentencing, but right now in the prison system, you've got prison officers that are getting abused in these prisons. They are on poor pay and conditions. There's a recruitment crisis of prison officers. And I don't think we're going to solve this by some sort of reform of how many people are being arrested or how many people are being released. Yeah. We have to tackle overcrowding in our prison system. There needs to be more prisons. We need to be actually funding the people that work in this service.
Right, well, Taj is echoing what we heard on the programme last week from a former prison officer who described pretty dire, catastrophic conditions in prisons for both inmates and for prison staff, and particularly this issue of recruitment and the stress, the dangers being faced by prison officers. That's all happened on your party's watch.
I think it's important to say that that upgrade of the prison estate that makes it an easier place in which to do a very difficult job is something that absolutely can't come soon enough. And that has been the government's view for some time. It's about delivering something that was a priority before COVID, continues to be one after.
Matt?
But Matt, the Conservatives came out in August 2019 and said, we're going to spend £2.5 billion fixing this problem, 10,000 more places, build more prisons. It hasn't happened. And, you know, you're supposed to be the party of law and order. Like, you're supposed to be the party of controlled immigration. You're supposed to be the party of fiscal conservatism. None of this stuff is happening. And what worries me about where we are as a country is when you look at how ordinary people are feeling out there and you say, well, who do you trust to manage crime? They just say none of them. Who do you trust to manage immigration? None of them. Who do you trust to manage the economy? None of them. We are in a unique place, I think, in having a political class generally, and people are looking at it and saying, well, no one's got the solutions to these problems. And I'm sure, Labour, you've got ideas. But even when I was listening to you, I was thinking, yes, but what's your solution to the fact that we don't have enough places to send criminals? I mean, this is just basic level stuff for any society.
Well, we've got to look bigger at the problem, haven't we? I mean, we've had 14 years of criminal justice failure. We saw that back in 2011 when we saw 20,000 police officers being cut from our services. And ever since then, we've seen the consequences.
Restored, by the way.
Only just, but we have seen a continuous stream, you know, of the fact that the criminal justice system hasn't had the reforms that are necessary to divert people away from a life of crime and to tackle the causes of crime. That's where Labour's investment will make such a difference. We don't want more and more and more prison places. We don't want people going to prison in the first place. That means about giving people a different trajectory in life and creating the greater equality and opportunities for people in the country. That has not happened for 14 years, and that's why we need the investment in the right places in the system.
But how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it and provide those places?
Putting people in prison is an incredibly expensive exercise. So ensuring that we divert that money into more constructive ways. People go to prison to learn how to reoffend even worse. So putting people in a process where actually they're taken out of a life of crime will cut the costs.